"That's my private road, move your truck right now." Those were the first words I ever heard from my new neighbor. Ray screamed at me while she was literally dialing 911. My only crime? Parking my moving truck at my own lake cabin. What should have been a fresh start turned into 8 straight months of chaos, thanks to this unhinged HOA tyrant who decided to declare war over a parking spot. But as I would soon discover, something much darker was lurking behind her obsession. The deeper I looked, the stranger her secrets became. And in the end, the justice she faced couldn't have been more fitting. To this day, she's reminded daily of the worst mistake of her life. It all started on what should have been the calmest morning of my retirement. I'm Timothy Walker, 68 years old, finally stepping away from decades of work. 2 years had passed since my wife's death, and I thought I'd found peace in a cabin I picked up at an estate sale. Quiet mornings by the lake, a little woodworking in the garage. That was the dream. The previous owner had been a recluse who barely spoke to anyone for 40 years, which made me think I'd stumbled onto pure paradise. But I was about to be proven horribly wrong. The second my moving truck rolled down that narrow stretch of private road, cutting between the 5 cabins along the water, I should have known trouble was coming. I was just backing up to my door, coffee still sitting in the cup holder, when I heard a shrill, ear-splitting voice from across the way. "Excuse me. Excuse me," outbursts this woman from behind the bushes, flailing her arms like she was directing emergency aircraft. I thought something terrible had happened, so I rolled down the window. Instead, she started jabbing her finger at my truck like it had personally committed a felony. "You can't park here. This is a private road, with safety ordinances in place." I looked around. Not a single car in sight. Barely 7 in the morning. All I wanted was to unload my things without dropping my grandmother's antique dresser in the dirt. But this woman, Angela King, as I would later learn, had crowned herself ruler of the community, and she wasn't stopping there. She yanked out her phone and started dialing 911 right in front of me. That's when I pulled out my own phone and hit record. After 3 decades working as a carpenter, I'd learned one thing: document everything when you're dealing with unreasonable people. The moment she noticed my camera, her face went crimson. She completely lost control, screaming, "I don't care if you're recording. This is my road, and my husband died because of trucks like yours." That made me pause. For a split second, I wondered if there was a tragic story behind her rage. But before I could even respond, she doubled down. "The Michael Memorial Road Safety Fund spent over $100,000 to protect this road. You're destroying everything we've worked for." Meanwhile, I was just trying to move a couch, but she wouldn't stop. She physically stood in front of my truck, arms spread like she was defending democracy itself. That's when I knew, this woman wasn't just difficult, she was dangerous. 15 minutes later, Officer Martinez showed up. Finally, I thought, some common sense. Nope. Angela launched into a full-blown performance, accusing me of endangering the community and dishonoring her late husband's memory. The officer listened patiently, then finally said, "Ma'am, county records show this is a shared private road for 5 properties. I don't see any violations here." But Angela wasn't ready to accept reality. She pulled out a laminated document she called the Michael Memorial Road Safety Ordinance and waved it like it was the Constitution. Martinez sighed and told her calmly, "Ma'am, disputes like this are civil home matters. If there's criminal harassment, call us, but this gentleman has every legal right to use the road." That should have ended things. Instead, her face darkened to a shade of purple I didn't even know humans could turn. She pointed straight at me and hissed, "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. This road has rules you'll never understand." The way she said it chilled me. This wasn't about parking anymore. Something was seriously broken in her mind, and unfortunately, I'd just become her newest target. After the officer left, probably thrilled to escape, I hurried to finish unloading. Angela stood on her porch the entire time, glaring at me, sometimes muttering to herself and gesturing at the road like she was speaking to an invisible audience. That's when I started noticing strange details about her place. The luxury black Mercedes in her driveway, a fresh wreath on the door that looked more expensive than my monthly groceries, and inside her window, at least 15 framed photos of the same man, her late husband. I assumed they always posing with different vehicles on this very road. Cars, trucks, motorcycles, even a boat trailer, arranged like some bizarre shrine, complete with candles and flowers. But the creepiest moment came as I carried my toolbox inside. Angela stormed over again, phone in hand, saying she was documenting every violation for an emergency home meeting. Then she looked me dead in the eye and said, "My husband Michael is watching over this place. He doesn't approve of your disruption to our safety protocols." Is watching, not was. That word choice hit me like ice water. She wasn't just honoring her husband's memory, she believed his spirit was still policing the road. I told her firmly, "I bought this property legally. If you keep harassing me, I'll be the one calling the police." Angela just laughed, a low, bitter laugh that made my skin crawl. "Good luck with that, Mr. Walker. I am the authority here." Michael's spirit guides every decision I make. That night, I didn't sleep, not because I was adjusting to a new bed, but because every instinct in me screamed that something was horribly wrong. I spent hours installing security cameras around my property, already preparing for the storm I knew was coming. After everything with Angela, I knew I needed backup. That's when I called Emily Cooper, my old army buddy who'd gone on to become a property lawyer. She showed up at my cabin the next morning with coffee in one hand and a heavy briefcase in the other. The kind of briefcase that usually means someone's about to get their world flipped upside down. The night before, I'd started going through paperwork from the estate sale. Buried under old manuals and yellowing bills, I found a stack of unopened legal notices addressed to the previous owner. Every single one, dated 5 years back, stamped with words like urgent and boundary dispute resolution required. My hands shook as I read them. They weren't about taxes or permits, they were all about easement rights on our exact road. And the hermit who'd owned my cabin before me, he'd ignored every single warning. When Emily laid the documents across my kitchen table, she looked at me with a grim smile. "Tim, this isn't just some petty neighbor squabble. Angela's running something bigger than you realize." Emily had stayed up all night digging through county records, and what she uncovered made my blood run cold. My little cabin wasn't just another lakeside property, it was the original homestead on the lake. She slid an ancient-looking photocopy toward me at the original deed from the 1890s. According to it, my place was the very first structure built here, and that so-called private road Angela claimed as hers. It had started as my cabin's personal driveway. The irony was brutal. Angela had been screaming at me for parking on my own road. Emily walked me through the rest. Over the years, as more cabins went up around the lake, the owners were granted easement rights to use my driveway for access. Standard practice. But the road's legal ownership, it had never left the original homestead, which meant, technically, I owned the entire stretch. My head spun. How had I not known this? Emily explained. Estate sales only pass along the deed in front of you. Unless someone digs through the historical chain, you wouldn't have seen any of this. And clearly, the last guy never bothered. That afternoon, I braced myself and went to my first home meeting held, of course, in Angela's living room. Walking in felt like stepping into a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided against me. She had stacks of her Michael Memorial Road Safety Ordinance printed and spread out on the coffee table like ammunition. The second I entered, Angela announced to the 3 other cabin owners, "This is Timothy Walker, the man who violated our memorial safety rules yesterday." Not new neighbor Timothy. Not welcome to the community. No, I was branded the villain before I'd even sat down. Then she launched into her sermon. She recited the backstory of her husband Michael's tragic accident on the road, and how the community had voted on new safety measures afterward. No commercial trucks, no heavy vehicles, no roadside parking. Then, with dramatic flair, she slapped a fine notice in front of me, $500. Apparently, my moving truck had broken every single rule. I looked around, expecting someone to speak up, but no one did. The other neighbors sat stiff, eyes down. Fear was written all over them. Angela had them under her thumb, and that's when she slipped. While bragging about her so-called safety ordinance, she started talking numbers. The Michael Memorial Road Safety Fund has raised over $120,000 for improvements and protection, she declared. pulling out a leather-bound ledger like it was holy scripture. She claimed a consulting firm called Lakeshore Memorial Safety Consulting had been advising her every step of the way. It sounded official enough. But something about the way she clutched that ledger, refusing to let anyone else see the details, set off alarms in my head. So I asked the obvious question, can residents review how the memorial fund money's been spent? Her face went pale. Michael's legacy isn't open to public audit, she snapped. The consulting services involve grief counseling along with road safety expertise. Grief counseling for a road. That's when I knew for sure something was rotten. Emily, who'd been taking quiet notes the entire time, decided it was time to strike. She pulled the original homestead deed from her bag and set it on the coffee table like a royal flush. Mrs. King, she said calmly, according to county records, Mr. Walker's property holds the original title to this road. The rest of you only have easement rights. That hasn't changed in over a century. Silence. Absolute silence. The other cabin owners looked stunned. Angela stared at the document like it was written in code, her lips moving but no words coming out. Finally, she blurted, "That's ancient paperwork. HOA governance overrides those old claims." But her voice shook. She knew she'd just lost control of the narrative. After the meeting, while Angela was frantically making phone calls in her kitchen, one of the homeowners slipped over to me. David Rodriguez, a retired 60-year-old, quietly introduced himself. He told me he'd once been the HOA treasurer until Angela forced him out for asking too many questions about the money. Then he handed me a sealed envelope. Inside are copies of financial records I kept, he whispered. You'll want to look closely at who really owns that consulting company. Driving back to my cabin, I could barely keep my hands steady on the wheel. I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. Angela had spent years bullying this community, pocketing money under the guise of honoring her dead husband, and propping herself up with lies. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I'd spent decades in construction, battling shady contractors, cheating suppliers, and bureaucratic red tape. I knew how to fight someone like her. That evening, Emily called me again with confirmation. Tim, she said, that Lakeshore Memorial Safety Consulting Company? It's registered to a P.O. box. Sole proprietor, Angela King. She's been funneling the entire $120,000 to herself. When Emily told me the truth, I almost dropped the phone. Angela wasn't just skimming a little off the top. She was funneling all the so-called memorial donations through a fake consulting business she owned herself. She'd been stealing from people who thought they were honoring her late husband. But Emily wasn't finished. Her voice was sharp with disgust. Timothy, it's worse than you think. I found business cards in the home meeting room trash aimed at luxury resorts. Your neighbor isn't just obsessed with road safety. She's tied into something much bigger. The puzzle pieces started falling into place, but it wasn't until I checked my security cameras that things really clicked. On the very day I'd been installing them, while I was inside unpacking boxes, the cameras caught Angela in her backyard. She stood in front of a little memorial garden, speaking into the empty air. Only, it wasn't a one-sided rant. She paused, nodded, and even argued, as if someone invisible was answering back. The audio pickup was crystal clear. Michael, they don't understand our vision for this place, she said, her tone desperate. But the development will honor your memory with luxury safety features. That word development hit like a hammer. Development, combined with the MEDEV cards Emily had discovered, suddenly everything smelled rotten. I stayed up until 3 in the morning, cross-referencing what we knew. The sham memorial fund, the consulting payments, the resort connection, and a widow who apparently thought her missing husband was still whispering plans in her ear from beyond the grave. Because here's the kicker: Michael wasn't dead. He'd been declared missing, which meant no insurance payout. That explained why Angela was so desperate for cash. At dawn, Emily called me again, her voice shaking with both outrage and adrenaline. Tim, you need to see this now. Angela King isn't just embezzling donations. She's orchestrated one of the most elaborate community frauds I've ever seen. I drove straight to her office. When I walked in, it looked like a war room. 3 tables covered in documents, color-coded tabs, highlighted contracts. Emily laid it out. Every cent of the Michael Memorial Road Safety Fund had been funneled into Angela's phony company, Lakeshore Memorial Safety Consulting. And get this, the company was registered 6 months after Michael vanished. That wasn't the worst of it. Angela hadn't just convinced our tiny HOA to contribute. She'd solicited donations from families across the entire region. Dozens of heartfelt letters had accompanied checks ranging from $50 to $5,000. Emily held one up for me. "Our hearts break for your loss. We hope this helps protect others from such tragedy." I felt sick. Angela had weaponized grief itself, exploiting the kindness of strangers to pad her own pockets. But the real smoking gun was inside a folder marked "Medev Correspondence." Printed emails, dating back 6 months, revealed everything. Subject lines like resident transition planning and development timeline acceleration. One email made my blood boil. "Mrs. King has agreed to the fee of $800,000 for community coordination, payable upon successful completion of the project. Timeline remains March 2024 for full resident cooperation and clear property access." $800,000. Angela wasn't just milking donations. She was being paid nearly $1 million by a luxury resort developer to clear us out. The deal was worth $2.8 million total if she delivered the community's cooperation and road access, which meant she had 4 months left to eliminate any opposition. Suddenly, her relentless harassment campaign made perfect sense. She wasn't protecting Michael's memory. She was paving the way for bulldozers. That afternoon, I doubled down on surveillance. More cameras, wider angles, zoom lenses pointed straight at Angela's place. And they paid off. Every Wednesday at exactly 2 o'clock, her black Mercedes pulled up. The visitors weren't grief counselors or road experts. They were men in tailored suits, carrying blueprints and site surveys. And when they left, I caught something even more damning. Angela, standing at her backyard memorial, phone in hand, snapping at whoever was on the other end. "No, the timeline cannot be extended. I've already eliminated 2 properties and the 3rd family is wavering. The Walker situation is temporary. I'll handle it." Eliminated 2 properties. My blood ran cold. What did she mean by handle it? That night, Emily and I sat down and mapped out our counterattack. "The fraud is enough to sink her," Emily said. "But if we prove she's been systematically intimidating residents to sell, we can push for criminal charges." I was ready to charge in, guns blazing, but Emily cautioned me. "The community's been living under her shadow for 3 years. If we want them to turn against her, they need to see who she really is." Gradually, in her own words. The next morning, I decided to put her to the test. I set myself up on my deck with binoculars, pretending to birdwatch, but in reality, every glance was aimed squarely at Angela's house. I wanted her to know someone was finally watching her. Within minutes, Angela stormed across the yard and onto my property. "Mr. Walker, your surveillance of my home is harassment under memorial safety regulations," she snapped. I lowered the binoculars, keeping my expression calm. "Ma'am, I'm birdwatching on my own deck. If you're worried about privacy, perhaps close the curtains during your broken bar business discussions." Her face reddened instantly. "Business meetings? I don't know what you're talking about," she hissed, though the flicker of panic behind her outrage betrayed her. She knew I had seen something, but not how much. I leaned back casually. "I'm just a retired carpenter enjoying nature. But if certain black luxury cars are conducting business in a memorial neighborhood, well, a broken bar, maybe that's worth mentioning at the next HOA gathering." Her jaw worked like she was gasping for air. She'd been cornered. By that afternoon, the intimidation began. First came a voicemail. "Mr. Walker, your harassment of a grieving widow will have severe legal consequences. I am documenting everything for criminal prosecution." Then an email followed, dripping with manufactured authority. "Final warning, cease surveillance immediately or face legal action for stalking, privacy invasion, and defamation of Michael's memorial legacy." It was a barrage of legal jargon strung together, clearly meant to scare me into silence. But after 30 years of battling shady contractors, Angela's attempts were almost laughable. The real turning point came when David, the former treasurer, contacted me. "Timothy, I found something in the old HOA records you need to see." He spread out minutes and documents that revealed Angela had done more than just tweak a memorial ordinance. She had engineered an entirely separate funding structure, one that bypassed normal HOA oversight, no audits, no limits, no board control. In other words, a slush fund built from the community's grief, under her exclusive control. Then David showed me a collection of letters and emails spanning 2 years. A pattern emerged. Families didn't just decide to leave. They were pushed. Noise complaints, accusations, petty violations, safety threats, and when that didn't work, escalating legal intimidation until families caved and sold their cabins for far below market value. She's been conducting psychological warfare, David said grimly, and it's not over. The most chilling piece was a private memo Angela had written to herself. Phase 1. Establish authority through grief sympathy. Phase 2. Remove problematic residents via harassment. Phase 3. Partner with developers to transform the community. Completion date: March 2024. This wasn't random cruelty, it was a blueprint. My neighbors weren't people to her. They were obstacles. That night, I sat on my deck, eyes fixed on Angela's cabin. Her lights burned well past midnight. Through the binoculars, I watched her pacing furiously, phone clutched to her ear. Whoever was pushing her, my arrival had thrown her plans into disarray. Emily called with the final confirmation. Timothy, Medev Luxury Resorts filed their permit applications 6 months ago for a luxury resort and spa. The proposal includes your entire neighborhood. The truth settled like lead in my stomach. Angela wasn't just siphoning donations. She was betraying every single family who had trusted her, turning grief into currency, compassion into leverage, and our homes into bargaining chips. For 3 years, she had refined her system, weaponizing sympathy, driving families out, and paving the way for bulldozers. And she was set to walk away with nearly $1 million. But Angela had overlooked one detail. She hadn't just targeted frightened families, she'd come after an old carpenter who knew exactly how to dismantle a con, nail by nail. She was prepared to scorch the earth to protect her scheme. But there was still one puzzle piece that haunted me. The man at the memorial. Who was he? And why did he look exactly like Michael King, dead for 3 years? That question was answered one Tuesday morning at Henderson's Hardware. I was browsing screws for my deck repair when I saw him. Michael King, alive, standing in the plumbing aisle. The coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered. He looked up at the sound. Our eyes met. His face shifted from calm to sheer panic in an instant. He dropped his fittings and bolted. I may be 68. But decades of chasing down crooked contractors had kept me quick on my feet. I caught him fumbling with his truck keys. Michael King, I said firmly. He froze, then turned slowly. Same face, same build, just longer hair, a beard. No mistake. Please, he whispered desperately, eyes darting around. Don't tell her you saw me. You don't understand what she's capable of. His terror stopped me cold. This wasn't a runaway husband. This was a man hiding in fear of his wife. We drove to a diner 30 miles away before he felt safe enough to speak. His story was darker than I ever imagined. When we first married, she was protective. At first, it felt like love, but then in a broken bar it became suffocating. She tracked my every move, cut me off from friends, took control of every dollar. He pulled up photos of bruises, a GPS tracker hidden in his truck, bank records showing how she gradually tightened her grip on his entire life. The night I disappeared, he continued, hands trembling around his coffee cup, we fought again. I wanted to see my brother. She threatened to have me committed if I didn't cut ties with my family. That night, during the storm, I staged my own death. Made it look like a fishing accident. My brother was waiting on shore with a new identity. Michael's confession continued, his voice tight with the weight of years in hiding. My brother Robert's a coroner in the next county. He helped me disappear in new papers, a new name, Mike Thompson. Angela never doubted it because by then she'd already convinced everyone, even herself, that I was unstable and suicidal. The revelation made my blood turn cold. He hadn't vanished to another state or country. Michael had been living less than 20 miles away for 3 years, scraping by on cash construction jobs while quietly watching Angela descend into something unrecognizable. I thought faking my death would set her free, he admitted. eyes glassy with tears, that she'd heal and rebuild her life. Instead, she weaponized my death. She used it to control this entire neighborhood. Sometimes I watch her from a distance, and I don't even see the woman I married anymore. The fresh flowers at his memorial weren't from a grieving widow. They were from Michael himself, an act of mourning for a life he could never reclaim. Then Michael gripped my arm across the diner table. Timothy, she's not evil. She's broken. The development deal, the slush fund, the harassment, it all started as her way of honoring me. But now it's grown into something completely insane. He showed me photos taken on his phone. Every single one showed Angela standing alone, animatedly speaking to empty air, her face intent, her hands gesturing as though in deep conversation. She talks to me every day, he whispered. Or at least, she thinks she does. I made this happen when I ran away instead of helping us both. Now she believes every scheme she's running is something I wanted. The truth pressed down like a weight on my chest. Michael wasn't just a domestic abuse survivor, he was also the accidental architect of Angela's spiral. His escape had freed him, but in turn it had unleashed Angela on an entire community. "What do you want me to do with this?" I asked. His answer knocked the air out of me. "I want to tell the truth, publicly. If that means prison for faking my death, fine, but she has to be stopped." The decision wasn't simple. Exposing him would ruin his second life and almost certainly put him behind bars for fraud. But meanwhile, Angela's campaign against me was ramping up fast. She filed official harassment complaints with the sheriff. Emily got cease and desist letters filled with legal jargon. Regional HOA groups were suddenly buzzing with rumors about a dangerous outsider stirring up grief-stricken neighborhoods for profit. Angela was throwing everything she had at me to protect her scheme. But then, my security cameras captured something extraordinary. One night, Angela stood before Michael's memorial garden, speaking aloud. This time, my new audio equipment caught her side of the conversation. "Michael, the new neighbor is trying to ruin what we've built, but the resort money will finally let us leave this place where you died, start over somewhere better." She paused, nodded to some imagined reply, then went on. "I know you'd approve of the luxury resort plan. You always said this community deserved something special." The realization was chilling. Angela wasn't just manipulating grief, as she genuinely believed she was following instructions from her dead husband. To her, these weren't crimes. They were business plans carried out with Michael's blessing from beyond the grave. Emily and I spent the next week tightening our evidence. Meanwhile, Angela escalated. She hired a private investigator to dig into my past, filed complaints with the state HOA regulatory board, even fed a local reporter a story that I was a heartless outsider harassing a widow for financial gain. Her tactics weren't random tantrums, they were deliberate maneuvers from someone who had spent years perfecting the art of controlling perception. The real shock came in a phone call from Medev Luxury Resorts. A smooth, professional voice introduced himself as Brad Hutchinson. "Mr. Walker, I hear you're experiencing some broken bar difficulties adjusting to your neighborhood. Medev would be glad to purchase your cabin for above market value. Let's say $400,000. That was $100,000 more than I'd paid. But when I turned him down, his tone chilled. "Mrs. King has been very cooperative. We'd hate to see that spirit of cooperation disrupted." That night I couldn't sleep. Angela wasn't just a manipulative widow. She was a cog in a corporate machine preparing to erase 5 families and replace our peaceful lake with a luxury resort. She'd been lining her pockets with $800,000 while destroying the very community she pretended to protect. The most disturbing part? She wasn't doing it out of malice. She believed Michael's ghost was guiding her every move. By midnight, I'd made my decision. Angela needed to be confronted with the reality she'd created. Michael deserved to see how his faked death had fueled this madness, and the families in this neighborhood needed protection from both the corporation and Angela herself. When I told Michael about the resort plans the next morning, he broke down. "Dear God, a broken bar I caused this," he said through tears. "If admitting what I did and going to prison is what it takes to stop her, I'll do it. But I wasn't ready to throw a survivor of abuse into a cell to fix what his abuser had done. There had to be another way." That other way arrived in the form of a community meeting. Angela herself called it, confident she could turn public opinion against me. What she didn't expect was that David quietly rallied every family who'd ever donated to the memorial fund, and Emily arrived with 3 boxes of records and a live stream setup, prepared to expose Angela to hundreds of viewers. Angela transformed the community hall into her stage, a projector ready, chairs arranged like a courtroom, her table raised so she looked down on everyone. "Tonight," she announced to the packed room, "we address the coordinated attack on our grieving community by an outsider who disrespects memorial tradition and safety regulations." She clicked through slides like a prosecutor. My cameras, photos of me on my deck with binoculars, every detail twisted into her victim narrative. The crowd nodded along, already buying into her story. Then Emily rose, calm and steady. "Before we debate Mr. Walker's alleged misconduct, I think these families deserve transparency about their donations." She connected her laptop to Angela's projector. On the screen appeared the financial records David had uncovered. Lakeshore Memorial Safety Consulting, the company that received $120,000. Broken bar. Michael's voice was low but steady as he explained. After his staged disappearance, he managed to build a new life with his brother's help. Robert, who worked as a county coroner, forged the paperwork and provided a false identity under the name Mike Thompson, because Angela had already convinced the world that her husband was unstable and suicidal. No one doubted the story, but the most chilling revelation wasn't the deception itself, it was proximity. Michael hadn't vanished across the country or hidden overseas. He'd been living just 20 miles away, working off-the-books construction jobs, quietly watching Angela from the shadows for 3 long years. "I thought disappearing would let her grieve, heal, and eventually move on," he admitted, his eyes wet with regret. "Instead, she weaponized my death. She's become unrecognizably driven by greed, paranoia, and control." He confessed that he had been the one leaving fresh flowers at his own memorial. It was his way of keeping a fragile connection to the life he once had, even as he avoided the woman who had made that life unbearable. Then Michael gripped my arm across the diner table, urgency in his voice. "She isn't purely malicious, Timothy. She's fractured. Everything of the Memorial Fund scam, the harassment, the resort deal, it all began as her attempt to honor me. Over time, it spiraled into madness." On his phone, he showed me photos he had taken recently, Angela standing in her living room, talking animatedly to no one. In each image, her body language screamed of a two-sided conversation, but the other half of it didn't exist. "She talks to me every day," Michael whispered. "Not the real me, the ghost she's built in her head. She thinks my spirit approves of everything she's doing." The weight of his confession pressed down like a stone. This wasn't just corruption or greed. This was the aftermath of abuse, grief, and delusion intertwining into something monstrous. Michael hadn't simply fled an abusive spouse, his absence had fueled her descent into a dangerous obsession that now threatened the entire community. "What do you want me to do with this?" I asked carefully. Michael's answer stopped me cold. "Expose me if you have to. Reveal the truth. Send me to prison if that's what it takes. Just stop her before she destroys more lives." But I wasn't ready to push that button. A public confession would mean Angela's total ruin. Yes, but it would also send Michael to prison for identity fraud, social security violations, and a dozen other charges. He was willing to sacrifice himself, but I wasn't sure I could let him. Meanwhile, Angela was escalating. She filed harassment complaints with the sheriff, fired off cease and desist letters to Emily, and spread poisonous rumors through HOA networks painting me as a predator exploiting a grieving widow. She was pulling out every weapon in her arsenal to crush me before her deal closed. Then came the evidence that turned everything. My security cameras captured one of Angela's nightly conversations at Michael's memorial garden. This time, my audio gear picked up her words. "Michael, the new neighbor is trying to destroy everything we've built. But once the development money comes through, we can finally leave this cursed place and start fresh." She paused, nodded as though receiving instructions, then continued, "I know you approve of the resort plan. You always said this community deserved better." A chill ran through me. These weren't simply grief-fueled rumblings. Angela was conducting business meetings with her dead husband's ghost. She truly believed every betrayal, every scheme, was what Michael wanted. Emily and I tightened our case, But Angela was fighting just as hard. She hired a private investigator to dig dirt on me, filed complaints with the state HOA board, and even contacted local news stations to frame me as a profiteer targeting a widow. Then the corporate machine revealed itself. One evening, I got a call from a man named Brad Hutchinson, representing Megadev Resorts. His voice was smooth, professional. "Mr. Walker," he said, "we understand you're experiencing some conflicts with your new community. Megadev is willing to purchase your cabin for well above market value, ESA, $400,000 to help you move on peacefully." That was $100,000 more than I'd paid. But when I declined, his tone shifted from polite to icy. "We strongly recommend you reconsider. Mrs. King has been instrumental in ensuring local cooperation. It would be unfortunate if that harmony were a broken bar disrupted." That night, sleep wouldn't come. Angela wasn't just a manipulative HOA president. She was the linchpin for a corporate land grab that threatened to wipe out 5 families and replace our peaceful lakefront with a luxury resort. For years, she had systematically crushed opposition, funneled memorial funds into her schemes, and lined up an $800,000 payday for betraying every neighbor who had once cared for her. The most haunting part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was that Angela genuinely believed her dead husband's ghost was guiding her hand. By midnight, sitting on my deck, watching Angela's cabin glow with activity, I knew I had no choice. Michael needed to understand the monster his disappearance had helped create. Angela had to be confronted with reality. And the community needed protection both from corporate predators and the broken woman working hand in hand with them. The next morning, I told Michael about the resort deal. His face collapsed in horror. "Timothy," he said through tears, "I never imagined my escape would lead to this. If confessing the truth and going to prison will stop her, I'll do it." But I couldn't bring myself to let him throw away his second chance. There had to be another wise strategy to save our community without destroying the man who had already suffered more than enough.